I'm Damien.
Hi, and I'm Ezzy.
So today is the first in a series of 10 webinars, 5 steps to a better BIM management. So to start off with, we'll be talking about creating a BIM execution plan, agreeing a clear BIM scope, how to sequence tasks with your team, managing BIM tasks together to ensure everyone is on the same page, and finally, how to verify everything that's been done against your BIM requirements with the models.
Yeah, and there's lots to go over. We'll be reviewing some more of these in more detail in the coming weeks. To start off with, creating an execution plan. Why do we need a BIM execution plan?
Sometimes what we think we're saying isn't how people understand it.
Here is how the customer explained it, and here is how the BIM consultant described it, how the project was documented, what was actually installed, and finally, what the customer actually wanted was just a tire swing. And this is really why it's so important to have an effective BIM execution plan, a common agreement between everyone involved so that everyone can follow the same standards and the same process from start to finish.
Are they optional or mandatory? Well, sometimes they're optional, but more and more we're seeing that they're becoming mandatory. So especially with government projects, where you're going to need to be BIM compliant in order just to be able to pitch. And that's to make sure that everyone's following the same formats and processes, because that's really important.
Great, but why are some BIM execution plans and planning workflows unsuccessful? What we found out from some of the companies using BIM is that their current BIM plan process takes too long to create and manage. We also hear that some are created as a PDF document and they're just not being read. They're only reviewed if there's a situation or a problem that needs to be addressed.
Right. And there's also the agreement issue. So if we have a mandated BIM execution plan, but not everyone agrees with it, how do we get everyone to collaborate and sign off? And finally, just as important, is how do we make sure that this thing doesn't end up getting filed away and just never to be seen again?
So let's talk through some tips on how to have a successful BIM execution plan. The first one is to have a central location for all your team to be invited. There is a huge benefit in having an online environment where everyone has access to the live BIM execution plan. There's also a lot of success when teams actually build their BIM plans together, rather than coming from just one person. So everyone in the team is involved and they can take ownership of the project. We also see an increased engagement when there's a great content in there. Essentially, not only having a simple text document or a basic PDF, because they get ignored, they get filed away, and why not add some videos, some images to make it a little bit more exciting?
Yeah, I mean, it really means that people are more likely to interact with the documentation. I mean, no one really wants to be reading 100 pages of plain text. So, adding videos and pictures, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, also embedding things like flowcharts and iframes. So this Metaport survey, which you can see here, this helps add life and flair to the content. Also, these can be constantly updated, so everyone who has access to the plan, they can see it and they can view it.
And gaining a multi-party agreement, trying to have all the teams to agree on something is just not, it's not always really easy. So with this, everyone has a place where you can comment and put your thoughts on different aspects of the plan. And what's great then is that you avoid having that one person who sends out an email. So here everyone can see all the comments and everyone can add their comments as well. And that really helps with the collaboration. A collaborative workflow is key to everything here.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a never-ending cycle. When you're trying to agree on an entire document, if there's 100 pages or more, so what we recommend is to split it up into bite-sized sections, the commenting, the workflow, and then we can share them and publish them. Being able to comment on each one in every single section, and it allows you to break it up into smaller, more manageable sections.
Right, so we can publish filling out each section as we go. So having different gates as you develop in a collaborative form, and then going through an approval process. That has a lot more advantage in getting that multi-party agreement that's sought after.
Definitely.
So quickly recapping number one, which was BIM execution planning and helping that to be part of your BIM management workflow. Most of the success we see is when it's done online and collaboratively. Also, people really enjoy being able to comment and contribute on the structure of the BIM execution plan. So, that makes them feel part of it, which has a great effect later on their quality of work and the effort that they put in. And again, having the approval process in bite-sized form being able to approve certain parts without approving the whole thing allows you to move forward on what's been agreed, which ends up saving time and money.
Definitely. And don't forget, it's always accessible because it's online. It's always live, which is great if you're one of those people who likes to work at midnight. And so moving on to the second point, and let's talk about agreeing on a BIM scope for the BIM execution plan. Why do we need to agree on a BIM scope? Well, because everyone involved in the project, be they the architect, the engineer, or the trade manager, for example, everyone has their own idea on what their BIM would include.
Yeah, getting everyone to agree is really difficult. So what we find is that some of these challenges are linked to unclear responsibilities. Some are due to really complex spreadsheets that end up really just adding a lot of confusion. And also by having duplicate or missing scopes, that can cause a lot of headaches.
This seems to happen a lot. And what we want to do is help remove that confusion and show you some tips on how to agree on a clear BIM scope right from the start. So first off, we want to start with some basic questions. Why are we doing BIM? This is the main question we want to answer. Then, what scope is required? How much is actually needed? When is the scope needed? Who is responsible? And finally, where do we start? So the first thing to define in a BIM scope is the why. Why are we using BIM? Usually this could be for a BIM modeling or a BIM goal to track the phases and the milestones in the project. But once you know why you're using BIM, it's really easy to develop a scope list which defines what scope you actually need to include to accomplish those BIM uses. Then we can see how much is actually required, whether that's defining geometry or the structures, or whether we're defining information. Here we can have the right content in the right place and start answering the real question of why we actually need it. And actually, this really leads us into a more lean scope approach.
Packaging those requirements per model use and making sure that we know precisely rather than in an abstract way exactly what's required.
And finally, you want to define who is responsible for the scope and whether it's on the same or a different milestone. You want to define that very clearly.
So using a scope grid, you can actually able to share when those handovers take place. So in many projects, we have examples where content is owned by a certain trade. So for example, here, the stairs are owned by architects early on, and then the structural engineer takes over. So to recap, always start with a purpose. Why are we creating a model in the first place? We see a lot of teams responding well to a visual grid, not just the information or the accuracy or the geometry. It's a combination of all of those. So we define what's required by whom, and then we're able to assign them. And that helps us see the handover from one team to another. Very importantly, we're making it a lean workflow. So everyone understands what the requirements are and is able to deliver. So let's take a look at sequencing. Now that we have a scope, how do we go about sequencing the tasks? It's all about making sure that tasks get completed in the right way and at the right time. Even if we avoid clashes, it could still cost us lots of money. So an example here on the left-hand side, the pipes don't run through the cable tray, but it'll cost more in materials and time. But if we sequence this right, we can get the plumbing installed before the cable tray and avoid losing time and money. Why is sequencing BIM tasks such a challenge? One of the reasons is we often have isolated teams. Everyone's modeling their own scope, and it's difficult for us to understand and to influence other people's scopes. And since we can't all be in the same office at the same time, we end up with out of sequence work, which leads to rework, having to move something because it clashes or because it doesn't fit correctly.
Yeah, it's so true. And we know that lean workflows are really important and deliver great results, but it's a new concept to most people. And so now some tips for sequencing those BIM tasks. So firstly, when looking at the big picture, we want to have a system priority structure that sets the foundation, the more important or the less flexible items first, and then going on to the more flexible or less costly things to work on. This really works well. And also implementing a lean design management workflow, including pool planning and phase planning, so we can really sequence the tasks effectively.
So we have a really interesting way of doing that with this pool planning mechanism. So one of the key benefits we've seen of implementing this is the sticky note. That's not really just a sticky note. It's actually having a printed card with the exact image of the element. And that helps people to visualize and understand what it is, and it helps them with the sequencing around those things. And that usually results in a 6-week look ahead that we can understand the dependencies and also understand the notes and optimum sequence. And then we can take that to capture those in a visual way, so that we can start to identify where the critical dependencies lie, and we can get those tasks assigned to the correct team members.
The result is we start each team at the right time with the best start date, so we don't waste people's time, and we reduce the amount of rework because people are adding to the model at the right time and in the right place.
So, quick recap, we're enhancing teamwork. Collaboration, once again, is key. Yep. All of us need to agree on the system priority structure. Everyone involved needs to be present for the pool planning. And ultimately, this reduces the amount of work, and it makes managing and completing schedules lean and straightforward.
So now let's look at how we actually manage the tasks. Here is another scenario for you. So the manager says, "When will I get your status report?" And the reply, "You're asking for a status report on the status of the status report?" So why is updating the progress such a challenge?
Well, so everyone has their own to-do lists, applying their own timeframes and working in isolation. And then it's usually up to one person to gather everyone's tasks and see where everyone's at. Once you have all the updates, you ask, is everything done? Is all the information correct and up to date? Did everyone accomplish their tasks on time, et cetera, et cetera? So how can we check on all that?
So some tips for simply updating the progress report and making sure everything is in line. The biggest one we can recommend is using Kanban Boards. It's a simple column-based chart that you can drag and drop cards into, and it helps you understand what is the status of those cards, which are essentially tasks to complete. You can see what's in your backlog, what's ready to start working on, what's being prioritized, and what's ready for review. You can have lots of different columns to represent the progress of each task.
It's not just having a Kanban board. It's about doing everything in one place, right? So that means that everyone is then tracking the progress together and not in their individual silos.
So on the left-hand side of the screen, we see Michelle's tasks are simply filtered between what's in progress and what's ready for review. She can easily drag and drop her updates into the correct column as things progress. On the right-hand side, we see Ted. He sees the overview of all the tasks, what their status is, and therefore making it a lot easier to track the overall progress of the whole project. So just to recap, one to-do list can help all the team members collaborate in sequence and effectively communicate when tasks and content will be completed. And the Kanban boards help visualize this process and keep everything all in one place.
So finally, we're going to cover how to verify against BIM requirements. It's really important to ensure people are meeting the requirements that have been set. Why is that? Well, because one bad apple, a single bad model, can have a knock-on effect and cause a lot of problems for everyone else down the line in terms of clashes, missed content, and can really have an effect on the status of the project. So we want to keep it all on track. So it's really important to make sure you have compliance from everyone.
Definitely.
So why is this a challenge? Why is verifying against requirements so difficult? Sometimes the original requirements are often unclear. For example, here, is it a 6 or is it a 9? We use a lot of disconnected tools, and those don't make it easy to bring all the data back into one place and work on. And then understanding contracts. How is allocation of risk assigned? It's a big challenge when someone's not on the hook for something that's part of their requirements from a BIM perspective.
So now here are a few tips on BIM compliance. The first thing you want to do is prepare and consolidate your requirements. So one of those things might be to organize your requirements, whether they be by team, a team member, status milestones, or whatever that might be. You just want to grab all that information. You also want to organize your scope list. Then you want to consolidate or reference all the documents that are related to this. So whether that's a BIM execution plan and referencing other documents like submittals or specifications, you want to consolidate all of those tools or documents, and then gather any kind of notes that would be related to them. Anything that you may have discussed, whether it was in the pool planning sessions or in the kickoff meetings. So consolidating all of the information and having all this in one place, specifically tied to an element, this can really help you to begin the verification process. Then, of course, listing the requirements by the elements and system. And now we've got all this information, we can use it to verify against the model. So whether it's a model or whether it's a set of 2D drawings, we can review them according to our list of requirements and check off verifying that those tasks have been completed.
And the biggest part of this whole workflow is making sure that we get to a model or a set of content, a deliverable that is able to be shared and published. Never sharing something that's not been verified, that hasn't been checked. So it's really important that we go through this workflow, turn this model from shared to published. We need to make sure that it's met all those requirements.
Yeah, definitely. For someone who's providing a fed model, you really want to do your check before you send it off. But for someone who's receiving the model, this could be a very helpful tool to check your BIM compliance.
So to recap the tips on BIM compliance, let's consolidate all of the requirements in one place. Let's make sure that we review every single model before it's released to anybody else. Let's make sure that we go through that QA list to make sure it's consolidated, and then we can make it a lot easier to review before we share and publish the model. So in conclusion, to improve BIM management, we need to make sure that all teams are in agreement on the plan. We need to create a lean scope. A lean scope can really help you accomplish your BIM execution plan. Sequencing and scheduling, so that you're actually making sure that the sequence is lean and efficient, and we're not creating more rework down the line. And also as a team, managing and tracking and controlling, making sure that nothing's missed. So trying to consolidate tools and systems so that we can adhere to those requirements as we manage the process. And finally, verifying that the model is ready for its BIM use, whether that's cost estimation, coordination, or whatever, making sure that you're really confident with the model.
Yeah, great. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed watching. As we said before, if you have any questions, JB and Clive are in the chat for 10 minutes. So anything you want to ask, please do so. Anything we can't answer in 10 minutes time, here are our email addresses. So please do get in touch and we'll be sure to get back to you with answers. Also, to say thank you for joining us today, we're offering a free BIM readiness diagnostic, usually worth £300. So please register your details with us and we'll make sure to make that happen.
Yeah, and also don't forget that this is the first in a series of 10 webinars. So don't forget to sign up to those as well.
Yeah. You guys do look like you're in the same office. It's fantastic.
Shake hands.